So I'm joined again by my friend to discuss a few recent boxing matters. Most obvious one is perhaps Paul Smith versus Arthur Abraham. How did you score the fight?
I thought it was very close myself. Probably Abraham shaded it, but not by the margin mentioned by the judges, particularly not 119, 109. I thought that was absolutely crazy myself.
Yeah, my sort of thought process was that I've scored quite a few rounds to Smith because he was busier, but Abraham looked like a more effective fighter, so I kind of guess it depends as a judge what you prefer.
Yeah, for me, we've spoken about it before. I think compared to a lot of sports, the matter and value of someone's opinion affecting a result to me is crazy, and when you get something as clear cut as that, I think it leaves a lot of question marks.
I think as I said, I did a video post fight, and I said that I did score it to Paul Smith. He certainly didn't go and absolutely dominate and rip the title away, which he'd probably need to do, fighting in Germany. If I was promoting a super middleweight prospect, who would I rather fight for the belt, Smith or Abraham? I think Smith's an easier opponent. I know Abraham hasn't knocked someone out for a long time, but he looked like he had more class to his work, more punching power. I think what he needs to do is make the weight a bit easier and be more sort of active, because I think his activity was pretty low, and he may struggle away from home with that activity. It was a bit of a disappointment. How do you see Smith, assuming he doesn't get a rematch, do you see Smith versus Rocky Fielding?
It's a difficult one. I mean, Paul Smith, before the fight, I thought it was a bit of a joke, to be honest, as a lot of people did. He's a huge step up in class for a guy that didn't look as if he'd be able to take that step up in class. I thought commendable effort by him. I thought he hung in there really well. I thought he could have shaded it. I didn't think he looked overly threatening, so I don't think too many people would be worried about him as a prospect. I think he perhaps, on the occasion, built it up, went in with a good game plan. I think it all sort of fell into place, and not well enough to actually get the result, but maybe that's going to be Paul Smith's finest hour. In terms of where he goes now, I mean, world title sort of shots probably going to be few and far between for Paul Smith. Whether he goes to a Rocky Fielding type character may be more realistic, but if he loses to Rocky Fielding, that's him done.
How do you see that fight going?
I think Rocky Fielding is a more threatening opponent.
Yeah.
I can't see him knocking out Rocky Fielding. I can see it the other way around.
Well, Fielding's chin's kind of untested to me.
If Rocky Fielding loses to Steve Smith, that's
Paul Smith.
Paul Smith. Sorry, that really does stop him in his tracks. It stops, a serious, up and coming prospect against someone who did well in the recent fight, but it's a difficult one, isn't it? A difficult one to take.
I can see that fight happening, because I don't think Smith will get the rematch, and I think Smith is now quite a major money spinner. He's going to sell a lot of tickets, so they need an opponent who's going to bring in a huge crowd. Realistically, he's not going to get a Groves or a Gale or a Froch, so I could see Rocky Fielding, because that Liverpool derby would make a huge crowd up in Merseyside. So I think it's a realistic fight. I'm probably with you in that I'd just favour Fielding. But
how would it have to go for Smith to somehow manufacture a way to get a sort of Groves character?
Well, what I'd say is Smith's stock is at an all-time high, so if he's going to get a big fight, it's going to be in 2015. Now, if Groves is mandatory for Andre Durrell's title, if he lost that fight, perhaps he could do Smith as a big money comeback fight. Obviously, Carl Froch and James DeGale looking to fight January 31st. If DeGale lost that, perhaps he could come back against Paul Smith. Effectively, these guys are in big money fights now, and if DeGale and Groves take a loss, they're not going to want to drop down to fighting for 10 grand. They're going to want to sell tickets, want to be on Sky, want to be in big events, because that's what they're getting used to. So potentially, if one of those guys took a loss, they could come back against Paul Smith. I don't see those fights happening without a loss, because they're both mandatories for world titles, so they're not going to gamble that by fighting Smith.
I think Smith he's probably going to be looked upon as quite a nice opponent, I'd say. Like this latest fight has given him some kudos and credibility, but I don't think he's a much greater threat than he was, last Friday. I think he's hung in there well. He's taken his chance not to be embarrassed, but I don't think he's an overly threatening fighter, and he could become, a sort of half decent name for these guys to beat in time.
Yeah, he did well. He executed the game plan really well, but in terms of his assets, don't believe the hype that Eddie Hearn's saying. He's not the biggest puncher in the division. He's not got the most electric hand speed or electric movement. He's never beaten a top class opponent. So you're probably right. Someone like Rocky Fielding could use him as a big name. And I guess the other question is, we know Arthur Abraham's a decent level fighter, but it's unclear with problems at the weight and with him getting older how much he actually had less. Arthur Abraham survived by beating, apart from Robert Stieglitz, maybe B-list opponents. So it's questionable how strong the form is, sort of losing narrowly to Arthur Abraham anyway.
I think it'd be crazy to say that Smith might not ever win another fight if he starts getting lined up for these.
It's not impossible. If he got sparked by Rocky Fielding, he's obviously got a few quid in the bank after these fights, and he's got the regular slot on Sky as a pundit. So maybe that'd be better for him. It's hard to say. As for Arthur Abraham, there's quite a few interesting options. Arthur Abraham has the same promoter as Kessler. Kessler's making a comeback. Arthur Abraham has the same promoter as Groves. Now, Groves is mandatory to fight Dirrell, but there might be some problems organising that fight, so perhaps Groves could go for the world title against Abraham. There's also, Abraham's fought Stieglitz 3 times. Stieglitz is fighting Sturm. The winner of that will face Abraham, so there's some big fights in 2015 for Abraham. One that I wanted to ask you about briefly was Abraham George Groves. As I say, the likelihood is that Groves will fight Dirrell, but Dirrell's been clear he doesn't want to fight, so if that fight can't be organised, it would make sense for Groves to fight Abraham. How would you see that fight going?
I'm a big fan of Groves myself. I think he's got all the talent in the world and really, really like the guy. I think Abraham, I haven't seen a great deal of Abraham. My guess is he's better than he showed the other day. The consensus, particularly sort of Jim Watt chat, was that he came out very quick. He perhaps underestimated Smith and was looking to do him early there. But I'd guess Abraham was better than he showed. My biggest worry for that fight would be Groves' defence. I mean, he got absolutely smashed by Froch, left himself completely open, and then in the recent fight, I mean, he won it, no doubt, but there was a few times I was watching it and sort of winced. He left himself wide open, and to me, Abraham looked to be a solid puncher. He looked a lot better than the chap that Groves put away lately.
Brass. I think Groves' biggest asset is his punching power. Now, it's hard to see him stopping Abraham just because of how tough and how durable Abraham is. The blueprint to beating Arthur Abraham was sown by Carl Froch, backing him up against the ropes, throwing a constant jab. George Groves certainly got the boxing ability, certainly got the jab and the movement to do that. My question with Groves is his stamina. I don't think Abraham is the biggest puncher at super middleweight. He's a decent puncher at middleweight, but he's not got the knockouts on his CV at super middleweight to suggest he's a huge puncher at the weight. My biggest fear is, does George Groves really bring it for 12 rounds? He seems to get tired in fights. Now, we know Abraham's going to last to 12. Could he wear down Groves towards the end of the fight? Because Abraham, despite his low activity, despite him struggling with the weight, he'll be coming on at the end of the fight. He won the 12th round against Smith in a big way, and the question is, how durable is Groves over 12? There's still some doubt in my mind over that, if I'm honest.
The chat about Abraham was consistently how he's one of the strongest 12-round fighters, how his fitness is superb, but I don't think there was too much doubt that he did fade sort of fitness. He did look tired as that fight went on. He was, he started first couple of rounds, he's sitting in the corner grinning, smiling. He certainly wasn't doing that towards the end.
Yeah.
If you've got someone, if he's going toe to toe with a Groves rather than a Paul Smith, perhaps he's panting harder. Perhaps the fitness isn't quite what it was. I mean, he is he is getting older. There was chat that perhaps he wouldn't stay as well as he did, early in his career, and maybe that's not as big a factor as it so appears. Maybe if Groves does come out quick, does rush him, then maybe his fitness isn't quite what it's told, and perhaps we need to see a bit more from Groves on that front. There are these sort of stamina issues, but is it not time that he sorts these? He's a professional sportsman. He's got to be able to last the pace if he's going to achieve what he wants to be achieving.
Absolutely. It's an interesting fight if that does get made, but as I say, the likelihood is Groves will fight Durrell, and and Abraham will fight the Stieglitz-Stern winner. Obviously, Kessler coming back into the fray is a real interesting mix. He's targeting that third fight with Froch, and I think that probably will happen if Froch beats De Gale. Subscribers to my channel will know I think De Gale will beat Froch, but let's assume Froch beats De Gale. I could see that big Wembley fight. I don't think Froch is going to get this Chavez Jr. Vegas fight that he keeps going on about. I think Kessler, Froch, Summer, Wembley, I could see it happening.
I don't think anyone in Vegas wants to watch Carl Froch personally. I don't think they even know who he is out there. I must say,
right, yeah.
I think at the minute, with regards to George Groves, after a couple of Froch losses and quite an unconvincing win last time out, I think he wants to be avoiding Abraham for the minute. I think, taking him on too soon, losing another one, I think it begins to really question where this guy can go. And I think for someone who, I think he has bags of potential, I think if he sorts himself out defensively, he could become a really serious fighter, but he needs to do that before he loses another one, because it begins to become a bit of a worry.
I agree with you. I'd keep him at European level for a fight or two, but that's not going to happen. Groves is going to fight for a world title in his next match, whether that's Abraham or whether that's Durrell. Both Abraham and Durrell are big punchers, so I share your concerns, but it's going to be world title next for Groves. How do you see Froch Kessler 3 going?
Froch. I have to say Froch. Convincing last time out, wasn't he, Froch? And I'm not the biggest fan myself of Froch, more so his sort of outside of the ring antics. He's comic genius, but I'd love to see Froch with 2 black eyes. But I don't think it will happen.
But you don't think it will happen against Kessler?
No.
I think Froch could get exposed by a young boxer, a De Gale or a Groves type. I don't think he's going to get exposed by another sort of aging warrior type in Kessler.
It's got to be a money fight for Kessler.
It's a big money.
At this point.
It's a big money fight. Wembley Stadium, if they can get that 80,000 seats, it's going to be big. It's going to be really big. I do think James De Gale has the potential to derail this whole thing. I think Froch versus De Gale, the O2 has been booked January the 31st. I think De Gale will expose Froch, and I think that rematch could then take place at Wembley, and Kessler could be left in the dark. That's why I think Kessler-Abraham is a realistic match at some point in 2015. So I think Kessler's coming back for a big money fight against Froch, and I think there's the potential for Froch De Gale to be a big rematch. So it's my thought there. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was the Chris Eubank Jr. situation. I know you're a fan of his, possibly more so than myself.
Also of his father, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to, rather than asking a specific question, just Chris Eubank Jr., talk to me.
I'm a big fan of the guy. Maybe not so much his proven boxing calibre at the minute, but I think in terms of the way he's put together, in terms of the way his father's, creating waves in the media, I really like the way they're doing that. I mean, it's refreshing to see something a little bit different. It's all very, very pantomime, very Hollywood, and it's a bit ridiculous. But from a sort of spectator point of view, I enjoy it a lot. I think in terms of the recent antics, like, was that fight ever going to happen? Perhaps you're better placed to answer it than me, but I do like the pantomime antics.
Do you not think that I've got two different theories, and I'll ask you them individually. My first theory is, I think the pantomime is potentially quite damaging, because he comes out simply the best. He does all of this sort of play acting. If he got schooled by Billy Joe Saunders, are we talking about his career already being over?
That's why he's not taking the fight.
Yeah, but do you not think that the way he's been built up is wrong then? Because most fighters can come back from a loss, but it's going to be so hard for him to come back having behaved like that if he was to be Luke. I mean, do you agree?
I don't think he's going to, despite supposedly being lined up to fight BJ Saunders, I don't actually think he's going to put himself in a position to lose for a good while yet.
Yeah.
I think this itself was. I think these antics were lined up for a fight with Saunders down the line.
Yeah.
I think this has served to raise his profile higher. It will certainly create a lot of build-up for a future fight with Saunders. Create further sort of aggro between them, and it's probably not been the worst thing for Saunders anyway. Loads of publicity, you know, it's not been bad for either party. Will it open him up to criticism when he loses? Absolutely. But the guy's Chris Eubank's son. Like, he's always going to bring a big profile with him. He's always going to have pressure heaped upon him. So why not go the whole hog and create the opportunity for huge fights, huge controversy? Because that's what's going to happen. He's going to be hated, and if he can become a good boxer, how much money is he going to make from these big rivalries? I suggest quite a bit.
He's done some world-class sparring. He's been out to Vegas in the Mayweather gym. He's fought Froch in sparring. And I appreciate sparring's really important, but we need to see him in the ring. He didn't take a British title eliminator. He's only ever fought against international type opponents, 8-rounders. I really want to see him in a 10-rounder.
How many fights did he have?
I don't know. I'd guess
Roughly.
about 14, 15.
Which isn't loads. Like,
yeah, but if you look, George Groves beat Paul Smith in his 14th fight. But we need to see him against a Paul Smith type of opponent, a British champion type opponent. Like,
but does it need to be soon?
Yeah, I think it does if he wants to move in the right direction. Do you think, I mean, another reason that arguably he could be pulling out of this fight is if he was to win, Frank Warren wanted to extend their contract. Eddie Hearn did an interview the other day where Eddie Hearn said he's very interested in signing him. Did you see that? Chris Eubank Jr. and Sky?
Wouldn't be totally surprising, was it? Eddie Hearn seems to be getting some good people on board.
Yeah. I don't know if Eddie Hearn's going to take his set in the same way that Box Nation's done it, though.
You don't know, though. You don't know if something's already in place and this is, this is pre-prepared and encouraged by Hearn. You don't really know. There's all sorts of antics between Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren at the minute, by the sounds of it, arranging fights on the same day and whatnot. So it's hard to say. I mean, I don't think these two Eubanks are as stupid as they're appearing to be. I think there is some method behind all this madness.
Yeah, it's probably just building the profile. They never had any intention.
I think so. So would he sign? Maybe he would sign for Sky. Maybe they'd get the same.
Yeah.
It's like signing Mario Balotelli. He will sell tickets, but you've got to take the baggage with him.
Let me ask you this just before we finish on this one. Now let's assume Eubank Saunders is definitely not happening. I know it looks like Cleverly Bellew may be on the 22nd, but let me ask you, if you've got Cleverly Bellew and Fury Chisora on the same night, which one are you watching?
Just out of the two fights?
Well, let's assume Saunders...
Taking potentially Eubank out of
So let's say Saunders Eubank is definitely not happening. Who are you watching out of the first two?
Probably the heavyweight fight, to be honest. I think I'd probably... Is Box Nation that one?
Box Nation.
Yeah, I'd probably stream that myself, to be honest. I'd quite like to see what all the fuss is about with Tyson Fury and...
The thing is, the first Fury-Chisora fight wasn't close, whereas the first Cleverly Bellew fight was close. I think Cleverly Bellew are doing a press conference next week where they're doing it in Liverpool in the morning and then they're going on a tour bus to Cardiff. And and they're doing 2 in a day, how much it's going to kick off at that press conference.
Not the same bus, I think.
Well, you hope not. Whereas Fury Chisora at the press conference, Fury turns up with some tape over his mouth. So I wonder, that press conference is going to kick off. We all remember the "you rat" from Tony Bellew last time round. Whereas Fury's turning up with his mouth, covered. Is the press conference?
I think
Eubank Saunders, is that going to be a bigger fight?
I think it will be, as it gets closer to the fight. I think it will be further hyped up. I think that one probably will. It will have what you say. I think personal preference. a British heavyweight fight is
bigger than a British cruiserweight fight. Yeah,
few and far between in terms of like top level ones nowadays. It's probably one worth watching. You know, I don't particularly warm to Bellew or Cleverly myself, so I think I'd probably go for the heavyweight fight at this point.
One word answers: Fury Chisora. Who wins?
Chisora.
Chisora. Okay. I said one word answer. Now I want more than one word. KO or points?
Points.
I think Chisora on points. Wow. I think easy night for Fury. Easy night for Fury. I don't understand. Chisora's not a big puncher. He's going to be kept at range. Fury's going to have improved so much since the first fight.
Wait and see.
Wait and see. Cleverly Bellew?
Cleverly.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think Bellew, my only concern is Bellew's fought a higher level of opposition as a cruiser, but I think Cleverly's a more skilled fighter. I think he's got more potential. I view Bellew as sort of more of a European level fighter.
I think he's got more class, Cleverly.
Yeah. The only other thing I would say is, if you look back at that initial press conference, look how gaunt, look how slim Cleverly looks. Like, he looks like a skeleton, like literally a skeleton. People saying he's not a natural cruiserweight, and you know he's been fighting light heavyweights at cruiserweights. I don't believe that. If you look at how gaunt he was in that initial press conference, that tells me there was scope for him to move up in weight, and Cleverly became a light puncher at light heavyweight. For me, that is linked to the weight drain, but I'm interested to see the fight. I hope they don't happen on the same night. I'm going Cleverly and Fury, probably points both. But
not worrying about Chisora's weight drain on me.
I don't think Derek Chisora's going to be doing too much weight draining, but you never know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Do let us know in the comments section if there's anything you're interested in us discussing. Cheers.